Good evening, everyone. I'm Josh Heumann. I'm the curator of education and public program at the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery. Before we begin, we respectfully acknowledge the past and present traditional owners of this territory and their unique role in the life of this region. Toronto is located on the traditional territory of several nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Our relationship to the land Toronto currently occupies is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. The Power Plant is committed to honoring Indigenous peoples' unique cultural and spiritual relationships to the land and waters and their rich contribution to society. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and we ask that you respect the land and traditions of those who walked upon it for millennia before us. More often than not, the Power Plant's public programs are inspired by current exhibitions. And this season, we are excited to have exhibitions featuring Lebanese-French artists Johanna Haji Tomas and Khalil Jorej, German artist Mario Pfeiffer, and British artist Thomas J. Price. These exhibitions are on view through September 2nd and are accompanied by additional public programs. So if you haven't already, I highly encourage you to visit the Power Plant. And for more information, you can always check out thepowerplant.org. This evening, however, we turn to a local subject. Toronto-based artist Bruce Eves awarded a 2018 Governor General's Award for Outstanding Achievement in the Visual and Media Arts, featured in this film by Toronto-based filmmaker Peter Dudar. After the film, Bruce and Peter will take the stage along with David Gleeson. But first, David Gleeson will introduce the film. Gleeson is a London-based art historian, writer, and critic whose work has been published in Britain, throughout Europe, the USA, Canada, Russia, Iran, and Dubai. He has independently curated exhibitions in London and has worked in an advisory consultancy role for public and private galleries in the UK and Arts Council, England. So please welcome David Gleeson to the lectern.
Good evening, everybody. After that fulsome introduction by Josh, I would like to explain why I'm actually here. Of the things that Josh accused me of doing in the art world, one of the perks of my job is actually being able to see and access visual art that lies outside the market-driven mainstream of the art world. And as a result of this, I've been aware of Bruce Eves and his work for about 10 years. And so that's why I'm here to introduce the film tonight. And I'd just like to check, can you all hear me very well? Good, thanks for that. Unaccustomed as I am with microphones. There are two strands to Bruce Eves' work which I'm particularly fascinated by and why I followed him. One is his archival and curatorial work, where he collects, documents, whatever, and preserves LGBT history. On this side of the Atlantic, the biggest public LGBT archive is in the New York Public Library, which exists purely because of Bruce's work. The other strand of his work is the personal LGBT activism that has formed, I think, probably most of his work throughout his working life. There was an instance recently where a popular singing star called Madonna accepted an award from the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, and whatever one thinks of her singing or her music, she's always been, to my mind, for a superstar, bang on the nail about LGBT rights. And she said, when you're, when you're an activist, you never stop being one. Today in the afternoon, while I was thinking about being here and talking on behalf of this film and about Bruce's work, I went to the University of Ontario and saw an exhibition by Carrie Mae Weems, who's an American woman artist who's been producing work for decades concerned with oppression, race, class, sexism, and violence. She's an example of another artist for whom the medium is not so important as her activist message. And there are similar things here between her work and that of Bruce Eves. I have to say a quick word about Polari. The film is called Bruce Eves in Polari. I suspect there may be people in the audience who know what is Polari, but for those of you who don't, it's a language that was created in the mid-20th century in London by gay men as a way of communicating clearly to each other in a hostile environment. It's composed of London street slang, Cockney rhyming slang, Romany, back slang, a rather postmodern language. With the decriminalization of homosexuality in 1967, Polari fell out of use. But as part of his archival and curatorial work, Bruce has researched this and he uses it in a lot of his work. Here, it's been used as a framing device for this documentary. And I'd like to just say to all of you, it's fantabulosa bona to vadia doliix here tonight. And if you don't know what that means, you will by the end of the film. One other historical note, there's an institution mentioned in this film quite a few times called the Centre for Experimental Art and Communication, or CEAC for short. This was a hugely provocative and radical arts laboratory that existed here in Toronto and was notable for the way it was formed out of local people, but had a very international outlook. So for a few years, people from CEAC toured Europe and America. They invited foreign artists to come here, Steve Reich, Philip Glass. They had their first public concerts in Toronto, hosted by CEAC. And I mention this organization because both Bruce Eves and the director of the film, Peter Dudar, were active in CEAC at that time. I think their mature work stays true to the original radical premise of CEAC work, although they'd probably both agree that their mature work wouldn't have got showing at CEAC. But, so that's explaining what CEAC is when you see it. Now, I'll only hold you up for a few more moments. I've seen a lot of artists' biographies and documentaries in my time, and this one I find particularly interesting because it's intensely personal and intimate and quite poetic. As Josh said, there's going to be a question and answer afterwards, and we'd like to know what you think of it. So please do stick around and enjoy the film. Thanks very much. Hello again. Well, I would of course like to start off this question and answer by asking both of you really how you came to make this film and in what way you may see it as different to other artists' documentaries.
Okay, well, when Lilian told me that she was going to nominate me for the Governor General's Award, I started making notes because I had to cover the whole gamut of the career, which is 40 years. And I needed to do that to pick the 20 works to send to the Canada Council. And the notes evolved into a sort of 20,000 word text that I showed to Peter to ask him if this made any kind of sense at all. And he said that this is a screenplay. I mean, do you want to do it? And I said, yeah, sure, sure. I mean, I've never done anything like this before. But, I mean, that really is the basis of it.
So it actually came about from questions you were answering?
Answering myself, yeah, just to like figure out where the 20 spots where the 20 spots were across the course of 40 years.
And do you both have any ideas how this documentary differs from other artists' documentaries?
Normally, I mean the stereotype artist documentary is just like a series of talking heads, very slow moving, and really done by outsiders who don't really understand what the work is about or understand the context or anything else. I think what Peter has done is he's taken a form that is now so stereotyped and just like flipped it on its head and ripped it apart and redefined the genre entirely.
You want to add to that, Peter?
Yeah, as I said, when he originally presented the essay to me, yeah, I turned to him and said, yeah, I can make a film out of this. And the way it all came together was that initially we just filmed Bruce, I filmed Bruce just reading the entire essay, and then we built out from that. Now, in terms of how I presented him, we had a couple of advantages. One of them was that I was in the same art scene as Bruce from way back, so I had a pretty good understanding of what he was doing and how it fit within some sort of cultural context. And then as the film was and we also sort of collaborated in the sense that as I was in post-production with the film and I was putting it together, it was divided into 20 chapters, just like his essay. But what happened was that as I finished each chapter, I would then send it to Bruce and get some feedback. And certainly, if I was misrepresenting him, he would have let me know. And then, and one thing that made a big difference, I think, as well, is that when I'd finished the first edit, I showed it to Bruce, and the reason I decided to go with Polari all the way through is because I already knew it was going to end on his first major Polari piece. So I had put in the Polari titles throughout, but I hadn't translated them into English. And Bruce, and I think I had this sort of idea that, well, somebody's really interested, they'll just Google it or something. And Bruce insisted, he said, no, you've got to put the actual translation in the film itself, which I eventually did, and I think it made it a much better film.
Well, I'd like to know if any of you have an opinion or any questions about the film. Absolutely anything at all. Come on, don't be shy. Aha. There are microphones either side. Ladies and gentlemen, the fabulous Lily Eng. We can't hear you, Lily.
Oh, you can't hear me? Turn you on.
Just one moment, everybody.
Can you hear me now? Oh, yes. There we go. I think what I find really amazing is because I work with Peter, for many, many years, and also with Bruce, and found that his wonderful development from an experimental and avant-garde choreographer has now grown to include the language of a very unusual way of doing documentaries, which I really find really quite amazing. So I just wanted to find out, I've never asked Peter this, and maybe this would be of interest to myself and to everybody else, is, Peter, how do you feel like over the last 40-odd years of being a filmmaker that you've developed a vocabulary of experimental avant-garde work, and then you tend to being able to take things now and formulating it into a very formal aspect of film development and film vocabulary, and it's, maybe you could explain that a bit to us.
I don't know. I think it partly grows out of the fact that I hate it repeating myself. So, I had a screening yesterday of a short film that I'd done in 1976-77, which was still sort of part of the performance art period and so on. And then you come 40 years later to Bruce Eves and Polari, and there's no apparent resemblance between the two films at all. But at their core, there's something there. I think a lot of my films still sort of deal with movement, and I think part of what makes and what I tend to do is get very closely involved with my subject. So I think that's partly what happens in the film with Bruce. I shot. Basically through the whole film, I was saying, "You're talking to me. You're talking to me," and there I know there are moments in the film where Bruce wasn't so sure he wanted them to be seen publicly, and I had to basically assure him, it makes you human. It's part of who you are, and fills you out as a human being. So I think there's always that aspect. But sometimes, and partly it's like as you go on in the years, you get experience, and you have to learn to sort of go with it. Like a couple of years ago, I shot a film called Geriatrica with my mother, who was 90 years old and had severe dementia. And what I did was strap a pocket camera to her medical walker and stroll with her through the nursing home, and just have a conversation along the way. And it turned out that conversation became a very important part of the film. But in reality, the idea was just it would be an interesting movement experiment to strap a camera to her walker. So sometimes things just happen and you incorporate them, and over the years you learn to incorporate a lot. I shot some footage with Lily at the Harris water filtration plant out on the beaches, which is sort of, it's strange. It's not a public building, but it's full of Carrara marble. It's a very magnificent structure. And as we were filming, Lily had her 5-month-old daughter with her, and her daughter started reacting to the camera, et cetera, and at some point sort of literally approached, and I just, anyway, the point was I'm trying to make is that this wasn't planned, but I told the cameraman to keep shooting, and that happened, of course, as her daughter approached the camera and worked with the camera, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes it's, over the years, sometimes you plan things, but you have to let the accidents happen. Bruce is saying something sort of very intellectual in the film, and his dog goes insane in the background, and you don't stop shooting, you just keep shooting because it's really neat how Bruce tries to continue, sort of speaking the dialogue in the middle of all this. You just let those things happen, and I think over the years you just accumulate. Sometimes the accidents themselves accumulate and become part of your language.
The accidents sometimes take over.
I have one more comment, if I may. When I'm
Please go
watching,
ahead.
when I'm watching the film, I just wanted to say, both of your intelligence as men and as artists really came across to me. And I also realized that you guys are so comprehensive and have such depth with art history and writing. I mean, you guys are just really fabulous in that, and I just wanted to say that how honored I am that you guys are so, I'm really honored that this work is, I'm really feeling it. Like, I mean, it's really hitting me very viscerally. So, I know that it's really meaning a lot to me. So I really wanted to say that how deeply, deeply your personas, people, and has just emerged for me, So, and I think that's where it really works for me. That's all I wanted to say. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for this work. This is like a real legacy I kind of feel for me, for my generation, where I came out of, and for you guys to be able to present this to the community. And it really reflects a lot on, our generation and what we came forth and all the challenges. So thank you dearly, okay? I really, really respect that so much. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just one point that Lily made there. Bruce has sort of bemoaned, to me anyway, he's bemoaned the fact that there are generations that have followed us which have sort of lost a knowledge of art history. And I think in his work and in mine as well, we've tried to sort of recover some of that art history and relate it to the present day. I won't go into it too much, but it's become kind of a theme or a subject that we've been sort of very interested in. How does the the art of the 16th century relate to people walking through a shopping mall or something?
Thank you. Please, go
Yes.
right ahead.
Always following in the footsteps of Lily Eng. I just wanted to say, Peter, your eye as a filmmaker was so remarkable that I really felt that I was watching art in motion. Really, really excellent work. And Bruce, the historical content that you shared was so significant that I had forgotten that, we live in such an age of name calling and superficial stuff, but you actually brought forth the torture that a lot of gay men in particular went through. And I think it's historically significant and very humanistically important for someone like myself who understands that there's a humanity at work, but to actually see the detail. It's so important what the two of you have done. I can't even imagine, and I can hardly find the words for it. And even though at times, Bruce, you come across a little bit cynical.
I've been around for a while.
But the thing is, the movie in its entirety, and I know it's Peter's vision as well, but it's not a cynical piece of viewing. It's not a cynical opinion. It shows aspects that are very, very multidimensional and multifaceted. So I'm just so delighted that I was able to come and that you guys egged me on to come, and that I hope many more people get to see this for the value, the incredibly artistic and humanistic value that you both have, given us. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say is thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just one other point. You referred to the fact of how the images kept moving through the film. I think partly what helped was, besides being involved in non-commercial art, I was also a commercial artist in my day job, or working as a graphic artist. So I was able to put that into the film. I mean, because it is a challenge to figure out how to present someone who's doing static images on screen, and a lot of I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to move his art around without undermining it or destroying what it was. So having the graphic arts background was really helpful in this. I should also note, you see a movie on screen and you kind of just evaluate it in terms of what you see. But the fact is that we shot this with no money whatsoever. We shot with the equipment that I had available. Nobody got paid. We had no really. You hear stories about, wow, someone shot a film for $60,000. Well, we shot this for $0.
How about that? Would anybody else like to ask any questions? I think so.
One thing that I noticed is the breadth. Everything from Philip Glass and Einstein on the Beach, which I've heard once, and I'm still trying to understand it, to Polari, which is another language that I definitely would like to understand more about. In that breadth between Philip Glass and your piece on Polari, what would have been your favorite piece that you've done in that you've submitted to the Governor General for the...
Which would be which? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Okay, you submitted 20 pieces of work to the Governor General. Which of that 20 was your favorite?
Which in the film was the favorite?
Yeah.
I think the Parkside story, actually, both because it's really insulting and in your face, but also it's this actual historical document that really does, like Taylor said in the film, this is exactly how it was. But there is one little fib in the film, though, where I say, it's my absolute favorite gay bar, and it was, but when I say that everybody looked like him, well, not exactly. One or two did, but I figure, who's going to call me a liar?
I think one or two in any gay bar is a pretty good yield.
Yeah. But he's such a liar. We were all fat and Nelly, and he knows it.
Okay, would anybody else like to ask a question?
So of course I have many questions, but I'll restrain myself. Bruce, I wonder, now having achieved, what so many artists imagine as success, could you talk about what does success mean to you, and what advice might you have for artists who are maybe afraid of being authentically themselves in their work?
Or who are afraid of being authentic?
Yes.
Well, if they're afraid of being authentic, that means they're going after the money. So forget about going after the money. The weird thing about winning the Governor General's Award is that this is really embarrassing, but I didn't think when Lily told me that she was nominating me, I didn't think it was all that big of a deal. Only did I learn later that it's like really, I discovered it was very uncomfortable to be suddenly recognized. Just, you know, I don't know. I don't know what to say. You know, just be true to yourself. I mean, you know, forget about the arts councils. Forget about going after the money. You know, just do what you want to do.
Great. And then, of course, you know, sort of a broader question, probably for you, Bruce, and for David, but potentially Peter. Do you think a language like Polari, a hidden slang language, is, or the loss of Polari, we'll say, is a real loss to the gay and lesbian community or the gay community? Do you think that there are other hidden signals that are sort of like currently in place?
Well, I don't think it's lost to start with. It went out of fashion for a while. I mean, it's all the rage in London now. I mean, there's a writers group in London that's called Polari. There's an international effort to recapture the lexicon and update it and expand it. I never even heard of Polari until the 1990s, or 1980s actually, when I was doing the archive, and I had this job where I was an art director of a magazine, and one of the writers was Quentin Crisp, and he lived around the corner from me. And Quentin was like in his 80s at that point, and I thought, you know, it's like, I'll pick up his manuscripts up for him instead of having him to struggle on the subways and stuff. And we became friends, and I made a fatal mistake. I asked him about Polari, and he like flipped out. He said, "I don't remember any of that." And it's like, you know, because I mean, he admitted quite openly in The Naked Civil Servant that in the 1930s he was a sex worker. Polari, I think, is I think you view it in two ways. I think you view it as being, you know, a cultural artifact, but also I think you can view it as being a very interesting weapon that can be utilized, because you can talk about people right to their face and they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. So it's a really great way to plot.
You know what though? One of our major sources was Paul Baker, and he's just published a book. It's Fantabulosa, is it?
Paul Baker is a professor of linguistics at Lancaster University, and Polari, he wrote his doctoral dissertation on Polari, and he's just published it was like 500-page book.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly comprehensive.
It's like a really enormous book on Polari that is being published in next month.
Yeah, but the reason
it's called Fantabulosa.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up though is that this whole notion of a secret language is suddenly no longer secret. I mean, anybody.
It's no longer secret.
You can go on Amazon and order the book right now. So
right.
It's no longer what it was in the 1950s.
I mean, what killed it was there was a weekly radio program in Britain called Round the Horn, and one of the skits was of two, quote, friends who were sort of perennially unemployed actors, Julian and Sandy, and the skits were all done sort of 50-50 English and Polari. There was just enough Polari so that you could figure out what was going on. That's what killed it. Because, you know, if all of the Tory voters suddenly can understand Polari, well, then what's the point of it?
I bow to Bruce and Peter's superior knowledge. I thought it was the decriminalisation of homosexuality that led to the end of Polari, but what do I know?
Well, no, I mean, there was, you know, the early gay liberation movement, there was, you know, it had this sort of masculinist thrust to it that, you know, we're not all these limp-wristed fairies. We're not these limp-wristed fairies. We're not, you know, we're not these old embarrassing stereotypes. And that was when, you know, Polari really hit the skids. And it was rediscovered in the 90s as an artifact. It's very funny, it's very witty, but I think it's actually extremely subversive.
Please.
Can I be heard through this microphone? I'm kind of short. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm most impressed by the film, and even more when I hear you made it on nothing. That's just absolutely amazing. I'm going to display my utter stupidity now, so if you want to talk in your answer in Polari, to tell people how stupid I am before you give me an answer, that's okay. I did, you know, I learned a lot from the film. I have to say I met Peter and Bruce as senior artists, and I didn't know their work until I started to hear them in a group I belong to, which they do, which is a group for senior artists. But I have known and knew people who were very involved in the body politic years and years ago, so it's not total stupidity and innocence, but I'm not sure that I understood the no piece of art. And I wondered at times whether there was a significance to the number of no's that you said, because they weren't always consistent. But I didn't understand that, so if you could explain it, I'd be very grateful.
Okay, there are 28 no's in the piece, and that corresponds with the 28 prohibitions that are in Leviticus. It's like no tattoos, no cutting your hair, no eating pork, all of that kind of stuff, you know, and all the sexual prohibitions as well. There's only 28 of them, but they're all pretty vicious.
But what about the piece that you were saying no to?
That's Leviticus.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's like it's 9 panels in total, and that was actually in the National Gallery last year.
Okay, it's important to understand that.
Yeah.
And I got a bit of it when you spoke about it being Leviticus. But I think that the piece that you were saying no to, you had done that before you explained it. I'm not sure, but in any case, I appreciate the explanation and the film.
And then as far as the number of no's, when he's holding up each individual panels, and he's just articulating the number of no's in that particular panel, that's all.
Thank you. And who would like to ask the next question? Great, there's a few seconds for me to ask another. I mentioned SEAC earlier, which is an organization I've heard about. The definitive history is still to be written, but I'm always surprised that there seems to be very little information about it. And I think it was a very influential arts organization. Do you know why it appears to have been written out of history? Any ideas?
The Toronto art scene, we're talking about 1970s now, the Toronto art scene had a number of cliques in it, and essentially once SEAC was gone, the history was just written over, and people pretended it wasn't there anymore, because it was to their benefit not to have. I mean, this was an organization that went international, and you know, it was largely through SEAC that we ended up sort of touring throughout Europe, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, Bruce tells one story that I won't name names, but a director from one of the other galleries in Toronto at one point phoned up the director of SEAC and demanded to know how he had managed to make all these European connections. And it was like, that was the kind of thing. So once they were gone, people just pretended they no longer existed.
Do you have any ideas about that, Bruce?
Well, I mean, no, you're right. I mean, the story hasn't been written, and here's fuel for, I mean, all the documents are up at the Clara Thomas Archives at York University, so it's available to any master's or PhD student if they want to write their dissertations. That stuff is there, but I mean, I think there's a big hole in understanding the history of avant-garde art in Canada when that place is excluded.
Okay, and I think we have another question. No, is he changing his mind? Please.
I was going to mention the Dot Tour essay that was in C. The SEAC was banned in Canada. It was in a 1986 issue of C magazine and reprinted in a volume of Dot Tour's essays published by YYZ Books. I mean, that's a departure zone. That does bring out how SEAC was doing some things, and then, wait a minute, weren't some people doing some things later? It does put them in a lineage. It's not perfect, but...
Right, I mean, Dot's article was the first serious attempt at reconstructing the history. And it's given that all of the documents, as I understand it, given that all the documents were unsorted and in boxes, it's amazing that she was able to get it 95% correct, I'd say. But it's a first step. Someone needs to take what Dot did and really run with it and do the full history.
Ironically, the people I've met who don't like that essay are the punks from the Crash and Burn. I don't really know why, I've just encountered that.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Was that?
Could you say that again? I couldn't.
Ironically, the people I know who've bitched about that essay are the punks. Like the Diodes and the people, Ralph Alfonso and the people who are around the Crash and Burn. I mean, they're kind of minor players in the whole history in the context of that essay.
But why would they bitch about it?
I don't know.
Because they're nice to me.
Yeah. Bruce, actually, can you tell me more about Robert Canonage?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell me more about Robert Canonage and his gallery? It seems a bit of an outlier gallery in that row of galleries. And
Yeah, it is. We're not really, I'm a little bit alienated from the gallery at this point.
Sorry for prying.
No.
I mean, I must say though, we did publish an interview in a London magazine, which is run by one of the former Diodes, and they were quite happy to contribute the images to the film from that section of the film, and they let us use, the excerpt from Raw War. So I don't know. They were running the Crash and Burn, and they were quite happy to cooperate with us. So I don't know.